Hi guys, I'm Kudzi and this is my sister Kim and we're the Empowered Sisters. And today we're going to be talking about balancing taking care of others and taking care of yourself. And we're just going to share our thoughts around that topic. So we're just going to start by discussing what causes people to focus on taking care of others and not taking care of themselves. What do you think, Kim?
So for me, I think this is all about the values you're raised with. So I think
Mm,
when you're a young kid, you start to notice things around you. You start to get certain ideas about what's right morally and what makes a
hmm
good person. And this is all based on the patterns you see as a young child. And I think sometimes for women, especially Black African women, we sort
mm,
of are raised with the idea that the ultimate virtue is complete selflessness. So
yeah.
spending all your time and energy caring for other people, that's what makes a good woman. It's what makes a good wife. It's what makes a good daughter. It's what makes a good
Mm,
sister. So you start to get the idea that if I'm going to be lovable to people, if people are going to want me around and actually enjoy me, I have to
mm,
like sacrifice everything for them. And one metaphor I really like is setting yourself on fire to warm the people around you. So it's one of those situations where it becomes detrimental to you because now you're suffering and you're not actually getting what you need personally. And in
mm.
turn, all that leads to is resentment, I think,
Yeah.
and eventually burnout, where you don't have the capacity to help anyone or do anything for anyone else anymore.
Yeah, definitely. Like I agree with that. And I like that concept of setting yourself on fire to warm other people up. And I think definitely as Black women, because you hear even people talking about their mothers saying like, as one of the things that they admire about them, like, they would, even if we had very little, she would make sure that we've eaten and and she wouldn't eat or something like that. Like it's something that's admired and seen as like this selflessness as a mother is seen as a good quality. And I also think like sometimes like going from childhood as well as a sign of like something that comes up from like traumatic childhood or where you have been neglected and your needs have not been met, it kind of becomes learned behavior that you don't prioritize yourself. And because you have just learned that, that's just the way it is, and you're used to serving others, but it's not from a place of like love or anything. It's from a place of obligation, like because of abuse or neglect. So I find sometimes that if you have been neglected as a child, you grow up to neglect yourself. But you know that, you have to care. You want to care for people, but you are not included in that, people. Yeah, you are separate. So your need to care is just expressed to other people, and you don't know how to express it to yourself because you have never really actually experienced it, and you've never learned that you are actually worthy of being prioritized and worthy of being cared for. And sometimes people do that from a place of wounding and from a place of hurt and from a place of trauma, and they don't even realize that that is where it's coming from, like this need to just take care of others and not myself, because they look at like I was just like, reading and watching some videos about like especially narcissistic parents and that dynamic, because the child becomes the role of the parent. So the child is trained to take care of the parents. Like, and that is actually a traumatic experience, but that trauma is we reenact that trauma in our adult lives as well, not realizing that it's trauma. So I think it might come from that kind of place as well sometimes, for women, where it's just, it's repetition of traumatic cycles and negative cycles that you have seen in your life. Mm.
That's a really good point. It could actually be coming from a dysfunctional relationship that was learned at an early age, and you start to think
Yes,
that's what's normal, that's how it should be, and no one
yes.
was there to tell you otherwise. And I think one of the other main things is not raising children, especially young children, to understand how to ask for their needs. It's sort of
Yeah.
like we tell people that if you meet everyone else's needs, then they are happy, and that's ultimately the most important thing. But there's not a
Mm,
lot of emphasis around how to ask for what you need, if you need a break or if you need some help. It's often just like, how can we raise you to be very helpful to other people? But I've
mm,
noticed that a lot of the times we're not actually thinking about how we can teach children how to ask for what they need and how to set boundaries and actually be proactive about getting what they themselves need just to feel good. So not when
yeah.
things fall apart, but on a day-to-day regular maintenance type of
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
A- And I think another thing that another reason why people don't ask for what they need is a reaction. Like if someone like it's like kind of like PTSD or some sort. Like if you have asked for what you've needed and the response that you have gotten has been negative, you just that voice becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until it just disappears, until you just don't ask anymore. And I remember this example of these children who had been neglected. Like there were these children that had been neglected. They were like infants, and they used to be, I think they were, it must have been like during like the Holocaust or something like that, that they were just being taken care of. And they were just given one meal a day. They were not cuddled, they were not soothed when they cried. And they found that like as these kids got older, like they just didn't cry at all. And they'll be like, oh, these kids are like, so these are such good kids, they don't cry. And they would hold them. And you know how a child, when you hold them, like they put their hands around your neck, like they respond to that, to that action. But these kids were just limp. Like they would be picked up and then they're just limp because they're not used to their bodies, and their whole makeup has gotten used to not receiving care, that they're just silent. They just don't cry. But they don't, it's not that they don't need anything. It's just that it's been their voices, they have cried and cried and cried until their brain has told them, hey, crying is not going to get you what you want. So sometimes even people are, they don't want to, they're avoiding frustration to say, oh, if I ask, I'm not going to get anyway. So I'm just not going to ask. And I'm just going to do for others. Like I know how to give, I just don't know how to receive. So it just goes from that you might have been like, asking, and until you just don't ask anymore. So you just, yeah, it's easier to just, give to other people in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and I think that reminds us that even if you have someone in your life who has been that for you, so who has sacrificed so much for you so that you could have some level of comfort, don't forget
Mm,
that they need a break too at some point. Because I think
yeah,
sometimes people fall into a routine of, it's easier when they just let that person do everything and they let them take over, and you sort of just
mm,
take a back seat because it's enjoyable having everything done for you and like someone sacrifice everything.
exactly.
But then you have to be selfless for a moment, step away and be like, okay, I may be enjoying this, but do they perhaps need some help, or do they need a break to just do them for a little bit? So even if you
Yeah,
have someone in your life who's doing that for you, think about them too and be mindful of it
yeah,
so that you can consciously give them a break when they need it. And I'm sure they'll
yeah.
appreciate it.
And I find that in the workplace as well, you have those people at work who just help everyone. Like if someone is behind, they're just that person who's always helpful. They always put their hand up. They always like they just know that, this person is so helpful. But they say the people who help the most probably need like the most help themselves, and people communicate in different ways. And I think especially when it comes to people who are responding to trauma, if it's a trauma response, people have learned to not communicate with their voices because they haven't been heard. So people are going to communicate with their actions. So in order for them to tell you what they need, they act it out, like they give it to you. So that it's
Oh,
like kind of like
yes.
a hint to say, I'm going to do this for you because this is how. that's what I want done for myself, but
Mm.
it's often not reciprocated. Like as I was saying, people who help a lot at work, you then find that maybe they're falling behind, or they never get anyone to help them, even if they always seem to have the most workload, and at the end of the day they get stressed and burnt out, and maybe they leave or they get sick because people don't understand that maybe this person, by doing this, by showing me kindness, by doing all these things to me, it's actually communicating to me to say, hey, this is what I need from you. I'm doing this from you because I actually need it for myself as well. Like, can you return the favor? But they just don't know how to articulate it. And even if it's not coming from that space, I think, as you said, it's always good to look at the people who are those ones who always give, and give, and say, how can we give them a break, or how can we give back to them as well? And I'm sure they're gonna appreciate that so much
Yeah.
more, to say, oh, I've never had someone do that to me. And you're like, oh, with all the help that you show others, you've never had someone help you. That's most likely, the case with
Definitely.
people. Mm.
Definitely, I can see that. And I think it's also this image of strength that we've now attached to it. So not
Mm.
only is it more lovable, but there's this implication that you're stronger as a person if you can go
Mm.
weeks without like ever stopping to do anything for yourself. Like if you're dedicated to your family and your job, and that's how you spend all your time just running around for other people, getting other people's things done, then you must be
Mm.
amazingly strong. And like that's a great quality, right? But it's like
Yes,
they're not strong for that. In fact, I think it's even stronger to be vulnerable and say that I need a break,
absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
that is hard. You have to really be in a space where you're really courageous and you're ready to open up and say, okay, I'm vocalizing it now. I'm letting everyone know, and I'm doing what I need to do for me.
Yes. And also sometimes it's also from a reward system. Like, what is our reward system, and how have you been rewarded or given attention, even looking back at your childhood? Because like most children, for example, like, African households, like parents are strict about school or strict about other things. But when you work hard, like you're commended, like that's where you have gotten your attention. Like, so you're known as a hard worker, and all the accolades or all the praise that you've gotten is when you are working hard and doing. So we get into that in order for us to feel good. When we want to feel good, we go back to what we know used to get us rewarded. Used to, like when people say, oh, thank you. Oh, that was nice. Like that's our sense of reward. So when we want to feel validated, we go into these cycles. And if it's not balanced, it just becomes like a vicious cycle when you're giving, 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 and because maybe you're feeling depleted, and then you go into I need encouragement, and you don't know how to ask for help, or you don't know how to just say you are in need. You get into that cycle of, I know what will make people notice me, I know what will make people say good things about me. It's when I'm giving, it's when I'm working hard. So that's another reason why people sometimes like give to others and not to themselves, because what they're getting from the reaction that they're getting is validating them. And that's the only sense of validation. That's the only type of validation they're used to or that they've ever gotten in their upbringing or in their lives. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
see that.
And yeah, and also want to talk about, okay, so now we see we've talked about some of the reason why people would like, care for others and not care for themselves. So how can we like balance that? How can people balance that? Like balance taking care of others and caring for others as well as caring for themselves, like not neglecting themselves. What are some of the things that, they can do?
I think for me, the one thing I've noticed is people feel like obligations with other people can never be broken, but obligations to themselves can. So, for example, if I had planned to just have a restful evening in just me, maybe watching some TV, relaxing, I plan to have a nice bubble bath before bed. Like, I just wanted a quiet night in for myself, then that's not a priority, because the minute anyone else comes around and say, oh, actually, would you like to go out tonight, or would you like to do this with me and with me and my friends, or the minute someone else proposes that instead of spending time alone with yourself, you can go do something else that will serve someone else more, you
Mm,
feel like you can just, you can cancel whatever plans you had with yourself. Like those plans aren't important and they're not an obligation. So the minute you're sort of asked to do something else, you quickly change in order to suit what other people wanted from you with that time. So I think the
mm,
first thing is to actually like pencil it in, like put it into your calendar, put it into your schedule as something
mm,
that is actually part of your day. It's not just something that can be replaced if something else comes along. It's a commitment that you make with yourself. And then when that time comes, when you're told yourself, I'm just going to sit by myself and have some tea for 15 minutes, if that's what you wanted, give yourself that. If someone really needs something in that moment, you just ask them if it can wait. And if it can, then you can always help after you've had that time to yourself. But take it seriously, take it as seriously
mm,
as you would a work appointment. Just willy nilly drop that. So don't drop yourself, essentially. If
mm.
you plan to have time with yourself, take that time seriously and stay committed to it. So that's what I would say is a really good first step, especially if you're not used to taking that time. It may help to
Mm.
actually add it to your calendar, because that way it feels official, like something that should happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just thinking back to our previous video that we made about things you should know about introverts. And being an introvert myself, when I say self-care, like I'm talking about maybe just getting into bed with like some warm, fluffy pajamas and reading a nice book and having a cup of tea. Like to me, that is self-care and that is me time that will get me, really rejuvenated and ready for whatever is next. But I found that when it would come to there's someone who needs something and that's what I want to do, it was the problem I had was in explaining. To say, if I say to someone, oh, I just want to get into bed and read a book, they'll be like, really? Like, it's like they don't understand how important that is to you. So what I started doing is I've started to say, I don't need to explain. Like I can just say I'm not available and leave it at that and not feel judged to say people someone will say, well, you can always read a book anytime. Like that's not important. Like, why is that essential? Someone needs you over here. Like this is a serious thing, and all you want to do is stay in bed and read a book. Like kind of comparing the priorities and making me feel like, well, you don't have your priorities in the right place, kind of thing. So, and I've learned to say, if I need time to myself, I don't owe anyone an explanation as to the details of what I'm doing. I can just say I am not available, and that should be good enough. And, if someone asks, I'll just say, I'm busy, I'm working on something, or I just need to spend some time doing something and I can't make it, or, I can't come to that event, or I can't come to your birthday party because I just want to read a book. Like if you say it, like it sounds wrong, like, oh, that's like, why would you miss someone's birthday for that? But if you know that it's important to you, you actually don't need to share it. And for me, that's what's really helped me to take time and do the things that work for me without having to explain it to some people who might not get how that can help someone. So,
I,
yeah.
I think that's a great point. And I also thought about how challenging your self talk is a part of that. So I think
Mm,
when people have judged you before for wanting some downtime, for actually wanting to
yeah.
have that self care, what you start to do is also have like really negative conversations with yourself about needing
Mm,
self care. So let's say you've had a really busy week, there's a lot going on, and then you
mm,
decide tonight, I just kind of want to chill in bed with my book and let myself fall asleep early, and then someone said something to the effect of, but shouldn't you be working on that project or something? Like if someone
mm,
judges you, then you'll find yourself next time when you think, oh, should I just go to bed early tonight? And then you'll say things to yourself like, no, but that would be lazy. And what kind of
Mm,
person does that? Or isn't it selfish for me to rest while everyone else is outside chatting, you know? So you start to have really negative conversations around it. So you kind of need to be mindful about how you are thinking about self-care as well. Because
mm,
if it's something you do genuinely enjoy and would like to have yourself, but you find yourself talking yourself out of it because you think it's not worthwhile, or you think it doesn't make sense, or you start to tell yourself all these negative things, then it becomes easier to sort of dismiss that self-care aspect and sort of justify why it's better for you to spend every waking moment caring for other
mm.
people and putting your energy into that instead of ever stopping to give yourself the care you need.
Exactly. And I was just thinking as well, like another thing that we can help, like people can do to help balance taking care of themselves and taking care of others is knowing what happens. Like be aware what happens to you when you don't take care of yourself so that you do make it a priority. Like I know, like for myself, when I go into like if I find myself taking care of others more than myself, I get to a breaking point or I get so exhausted, I just get to like system shutdown mode. And that just looks like, okay, now I don't want to talk, I don't want to do anything. I just completely shut down. And I know that doesn't come off like in a positive way to the people who will be observing that and the people around me. So me just knowing how I get if I don't prioritize myself is enough to make me prioritize myself because I don't want to get to that point. And it's like, it's kind of like when you're eating food and you leave yourself like you don't eat your meals on time, like you're always skipping meals and then you just skip meals like for a whole day, you get to a point of starvation, and then you are like someone who's starving. Have you ever heard of people, like I've heard of people who are in like different kind of crisis, whether it be war or any other economic crisis, where it's like people start eating things that are not normally like food things, they're not considered food, but because they have gotten to a point of starvation they turn to those items. You see people experimenting eating different leaves and just wanting to survive, you know what I mean? And it's like it gets to that point when you skip meals, you get to a point of starvation and eat anything, and your body just needs nourishment. And if you get to a point of not prioritizing yourself, you get to a point of like psychological starvation, like where it's just like, now I just need to just shut down, just I just need to do anything to make me feel good. And sometimes you need even a quick hit. And for some people it can even be turning to alcohol or drugs, something just that's just going to give them that quick high because they've just gotten to the point of I just need something now. It's kind of like when a diabetic goes into like um hyperglycemia, or and then they just need a teaspoon of sugar just to bring themselves up, even though sugar is not good ordinarily for a person with diabetes. But when they get to that point where they are that low, it becomes almost like essential to save their lives. So it's kind of saying you don't want to get to a point where it's now you now have to just do anything to just survive because you are so depleted and you are at risk of going to do unhealthy things because they are giving you that quick high, and they are the things that, whether it be like you just binge eat or you just drink something or have shots of caffeine that will just make you go high because and that's probably not good for your health. So yeah,
Yeah,
understanding the
definitely.
consequences for yourself.
And I think if you get yourself to that point of burnout, like
Mm,
I think you may even get to a stage where what you're saying, like overindulgence becomes your problem because it's easy
mm,
when you're really depleted to also not have that good judgment to be like, okay, this is enough and now I can move on
yeah.
to something else. So if your happy place is having like a bar of chocolate, you know, while you sit
Mm,
down in the warm sun and you just take that in for a few minutes and now you haven't
mm,
had it for 20 something days. So when you finally get to it, you're like, you know what, I've earned it. I already haven't had any time to myself for so long. So I might as well have, 3 packets of chocolates because I earned it. And
Mm,
then afterwards,
yes,
you kick yourself and you're like, why would I do something like that? But it's
yeah,
because you were so depleted that it was hard for you to make that good to have that good judgment to say, okay, no, I've had enough now, and this is actually all I needed. Anything more
yeah,
would be greed, and it's hard for you to actually know what's the difference for you between enough and too
mm,
much, and that line gets blurred for you. And then again with the negative self-talk, because now you beat yourself up for it and you're less likely to actually do it regularly, and then the cycle
mm.
perpetuates itself.
Repeats itself. Exactly.
So you have to be
Wow,
aware of it.
that's
That way you actually sit down and say, okay, now I'm taking care of myself. Because I know that if it gets to a stage where I'm forced to do it, there's certain things I will overdo because now I'm completely
mm,
starved. Like you said, you're starved for it.
yeah,
And you just think eat, 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 like don't stop. Like food is just one
yeah,
option. It could be with sleep. You could find yourself not
mm,
waking up the whole day. Could be with anything really. When you finally get
yeah,
it, now you
yeah.
can't stop yourself.
Yeah, I can definitely remember times where I've done that, like whether it was with food, with sleep, with anything where it's just gotten to that point of depletion. So it's just a reminder, like, it is important. It's actually not for our physical health and for our mental health and for the good of everyone else around us. It is essential that we prioritize taking care of ourselves and taking care of others. Because if we neglect ourselves and, it's just going to lead to other negative consequences and circumstances. And yeah, and if we and it'll cause us to actually start neglecting people. Like, I'm a mom. If I get to the point of depletion, like, I can't even be there for my kids because I've got nothing left in me, and then I leave them, like, vulnerable and likely to get harmed by something because I don't have it in me anymore. So it's very essential. So yeah, that's been really like good, just exploring those different thoughts. What would you say, like, as something as a takeaway as we close, to people, like just something for them to think about this topic concerning this?
So I guess for me, one of my biggest breakthroughs on this has been self-care doesn't always have to be doing nothing. So I know in
Mm,
the movies, self-care is often seen as just sitting on the couch and watching TV all day. However, self-care can be doing the things you enjoy. So if you really like going to the cafe, like in your like workday mornings, for example, like you want to go to the cafe first thing and have a coffee, do that for yourself. Even if it
mm,
means waking up a little bit early to give yourself that nice treat. Self-care can also be actually taking the time to do something different or to get out of your comfort zone. If it's shopping that you wanted to do, you have to wake up maybe early to go to the shops and, get
mm,
that time in for yourself. So it can look like a bunch of different things, but essentially it's spending time doing something that fills you. So
mm,
don't let yourself get depleted. Do those things that actually help to make you feel full as a human being regularly so that you're always in a place of, I'm feeling good. And maybe when you're a little bit low, you top yourself up, but never to the extent that you need to overdo it because you completely
mm.
neglected it in the first place.
Totally agree with that. And I would say, just in closing, know what that is for you. Know how you fill your cup. Know what those things are, whether it's reading a book, whether it's going for a jog, whether it's catching up with a friend. Know what it is for you so that you can keep track of it and make sure that you are doing those things and you don't get to the point of depletion. So yeah, thanks guys. If you have any thoughts concerning this topic, or you want to share your experience or something that works for you, please write it down in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.